One of the important things is that the cost structure of the fine and specialty chemicals are very different from the cost structure of the bulk chemicals business. In bulk chemicals, in particular, the feedstock costs are a very significant portion of the overall cost of the finished product, and which is why you have this industry concentrated in places where the feedstocks are advantaged. And today the feedstocks are largely hydrocarbons, so which means that they are in places like the Middle East or North America, which have access to hydrocarbons. India, unfortunately, does not. So that's where I think the advantage for India lies largely in the fine and specialty chemical space. And that's where you're seeing, a lot of activity. Many of the companies who are participating here are also from this domain. What are four broad trends which are shaping the industry? I mean, this is a gross oversimplification, which has actually shaped the industry in the last few years. The first is the emergence of new markets, and when I say new markets, I include India as one of them. Of course, China has for long been the driver of global growth in both from a demand side as well as from a supply side. The quest for sustainable development is now, I mean, every company in the world today talks about sustainable growth. What can they do to ensure that they are going to be allowed to do business going forward? You're seeing new feedstock come up in the industry, particularly the use of bio-based raw materials, things like bioethanol, using oils, fats, using cellulosic waste. All those kind of initiatives are also coming up. And as I said before, a world in which there is a much stricter regulation of chemicals in terms of what is allowed, what is not allowed, both nationally as well as internationally. These are some of the concerns that the government has as far as the industry is concerned. I think there has been a lot of noise about the rising trade deficit in chemicals. I mean, and I'll show you some statistics. And what has happened is, while the industry demand has grown at a fairly okay clip for the last several years, much of this growth has been really catered to by imports, and this is an issue. And what has been even more worrying is that a lot of the import emphasis is on imports are happening particularly from China in the area of a lot of the fine chemicals, which serve as important raw materials going into pharma, agro, those kind of things. And you've seen government very concerned about this dependence on APIs as well as key starting materials coming from China. The safety of chemicals use is also a matter of grave concern. I mean, there are regulations globally to monitor and regulate what chemicals can be allowed, what are not allowed. And there's sometimes it is blanket ban, sometimes it is application specific, all of those things. And there is a need for comprehensive chemical regulation, and there is one which is currently being worked on, the full format of which is still up for discussion, and there's some shape taking place there, and you'll hear more about it in this conference. I think sustainability related practices in the industry is a big issue. You've seen in the last week, we have seen at least 3 major accidents reported from the industry. This is not good news. I mean, and some of these things tend to taint the whole industry with a brush. So even if you are doing some good work, it doesn't go noticed. I mean, what gets the highlight is some of the the negative. So you've got both the impact on the environment as well as the impact on human health, and this ties in with chemical regulations as well. This is a little bit on our import dependency. As you can see, in several sectors, while the chemical industry, grossly speaking, is a net importer, there are certain segments such as dyes, pharma, agro, flavors and fragrances, in which we have a positive balance of trade. But on the whole, this is an industry which is still very import dependent. And a peculiar fact is that Reliance alone accounts for about 9% of India's chemical exports, just one single company. So if you were to knock that out, you got a even more dismal. This is just a list of some chemicals that we import in very significant volumes. Organic chemical imports alone are just about $20 billion. And this ties to my earlier statement that a lot of growth which has happened by meeting imports, and domestic capacity has not kept the pace. If you were to look at the comparison between India and China, particularly as far as basic chemicals are concerned, you will see from this figure that there is really no comparison at all. If you were to look at India's capacities and that in China, methanol capacity in China is 278 times India's methanol capacity. You look at, the closest I think we come to is probably ethylene oxide and MEG, where our capacity is only 1/6 of that of China. Everywhere else, the figures are staggering. So that's the kind of. It also gives you a sense of where we can be, in terms of chemical manufacturing. We as a country and as a chemical industry, we barely scratch the surface of where we are. And even at these levels, we have huge challenges related to sustainability in terms of safety, etc. Imagine if we were to scale up, and we did it in the same way that we have been doing things in the past, then you really have a problem on your hands. Okay, so what did China do that we have not done right? I think some of these things are very obvious. The infrastructure issue. They also focused on the SEZ-driven, foreign investment-driven manufacturing, although that has now changed over the past. But also significant amount of R&D, and to their credit, China has developed technologies for not just fine chemicals but also for basic chemicals, which were earlier only the monopoly of the West. And what they have done is they have developed these technologies, sometimes unique pathways, for example, for using coal as a feedstock, which probably nowhere else in the world. They make MEG from coal, they make PVC from coal. These kind of things have not happened anywhere else in the world. There are some issues related to some of these technologies, but what I want to point out is that the kind of efforts that have gone in order to build local capabilities in technologies is something that we have not seen in India. Yeah. So what can we do? There has been a lot in terms of what we need to do to improve feedstock availability to build downstream industries, and I have listed here some of the approaches that we can take. There has been the talk about this PCPIRs for a long time. I have been writing about it for 20 years now, and I could have written something 20 years ago. I write it today. It is probably the situation has remained unchanged, which says a little bit about how slow we have been in getting this going. We are even seeing. There has been talk about India going abroad and investing, accessing some low-cost feedstocks overseas, and then bringing the penultimate products here, and then building value chains out here. You've seen recently announcement by Reliance that they will go and build a EDC complex in the UAE, bring the EDC here, and then build a vinyl project based on that. So we've even seen Reliance is again importing very large quantities of ethane all the way from the US, and using that as a way to build downstream capabilities. There has been a lot of talk in recent times about PLI schemes, and PLI schemes for several industries have been announced. There are some. There is a wish list, at least as far as the chemical industry is concerned, that the industry also needs a PLI scheme. I'm not sure whether this is going to happen. There have been very mixed signals coming from the government in terms of whether they are going to allow this or not allow. There's been a fair bit of work. The industry has drawn up a wish list of products that they think should be supported by a PLI scheme. Don't hold your breath waiting for that money to come in before you're going to make your investment. One of the things that has been done is, the government has said that, let's look at the top 100 products that we are importing into the country. and then support that kind of investment by way of a PLI scheme. I think as a starting point, I think it's a good thing, but I think it's a little too simplistic to look at that. And there are sometimes very, very good reasons why we don't make what we don't make. And setting that right through, artificial incentives is, in my view at least, not the right way to go about it. Uh, so I think we need to be careful on where we place our bets. My surmise is that the further you go down value chains, the more chemistry intensive your products and processes are. I think your competitiveness is much more than if we were to look at very, very upstream products based on hydrocarbon feedstock molecules. So I think the self-reliance is a great thing, but I think we should not be carried away here. Uh, the chemical industry is a globalized industry, and no country in the world makes everything that it needs. So I think to say that we should be doing that is I think doesn't make much sense. By and large, there is a significant trade in chemicals across the world, and it has helped the industry, I think. Uh, so I think building tariff walls, setting up non-tariff barriers, all that works in the short term, but it also creates problems for downstream industries. And I think we need to be very, very careful of how we intervene by policy measures, selectively targeting certain products and says, I will build tariff walls here, and then, encourage investments there. You can seriously compromise the competitiveness of downstream industries if you do that. And my belief is that that is where our true competitiveness lies. So we need to be careful about this. There is lot of talk today on refinery and petrochemical integration. I think I'll skip this in the interest of time. But surmise to say that more and more of the refineries, almost every refinery in India today, is looking at chemicals and petrochemicals as the way for sustainable growth. And they want to take more and more of that oil that they crack, move it into chemical value chains rather than into the fuel value chain. This is a very, very refreshing change from the levels of the past. One of the reasons is the reality of the world that automotive fuels in particular, demand for these are not going to grow at the rate at which they were growing in the past. So you will have to look at other outlets for those kind of molecules. And that there is a lot of effort now into very, very tight integration schemes between petrochemical manufacturing and oil refining. And the average integration levels, which are approximately about 7% going to chemicals in a refinery today, can go up to 70% for some of the new concepts which are now being talked about. Some of these projects have not yet, they are in the drawing board. Some of the technologies that you need to do this kind of integration are still not in place. They need to be developed, etc. But it gives you a sense of where the refining industry is headed. So they're going to be looking at petrochemicals and bulk chemicals in a very, very close manner. Now, this will have implications for people who are non-integrated, who are operating standalone chemical projects. These are giants in the business. One of these plants can completely change the supply dynamics of the world. So it has a lot of implications on the opportunities that other non-integrated players will have. I think again I just want to end with some critical needs that I think we need to still address. One is the need for key process technologies. Almost every process technology for bulk chemicals is today imported into the country. I think it's a national shame. I think we have completely failed in both in industry as well as in some of the academic institutions, the research laboratories in the country, to be able to develop technologies, be it for caustic soda, be it for phenol, be it for ammonia, urea. These are products we have been making for 50 years. year after year, project after project, we continue to import the technologies from overseas. I mean, I don't see why we need to. I can't stress enough about the need to improve process safety. I mean, I think this is a huge issue for the industry. I think some companies have done an excellent job in addressing some of these challenges, but a lot more needs to be done. And I think the image of the industry, the very license of society to allow this industry to operate is now being questioned. Don't take that for granted that, in most parts, most societies, most neighborhoods don't want the chemical industry around them. And governments, legislature will support initiatives which call for relocation. You have now seen it in Dombivli, for instance, where the government has ordered about 50 odd companies to shift. They were there before any development came up. But due to the practices of the industry, they are now being categorically told that they need to shift from there. And no amount of arguing about how you are important to the country, how you contribute to jobs and development is going to make sense. So we need to get our act together. I think the other point that I want to talk about is, I think we need to look at our portfolio that we make. There are products that we make that are going out of fashion for reasons of environmental safety, health, etc., which I think will. I mean, these trends have already come elsewhere in the world. They have not yet come to India because we don't have the policy in place. So we are not going to be an island which will have its own avatar of regulation. We will have something which will borrow. I think it will be good if it is contextualized to the problems of the chemical industry here. But change is coming. Okay, so this is something that I heard many years ago, and I thought it was a pretty boastful and statement to make. But this actually is now coming true. What regulation that Europe sets is something that the world follows today. And it's something that you need to keep in mind. I think just some concluding remarks here. We remain an importer of approximately 80 plus chemical intermediates across value chains, and I think this is an addressable opportunity. At least some of them are addressable opportunities. We will see India continuing to see growth which is higher than what is seen elsewhere in the world. But remember, the base on which this growth is happening is still very small compared to the size of India and the size of the chemical industry here. We talk about being an alternative to China, but remember, China is an extremely large shoe to fit in. Their chemical industry is 10 times ours. They are close to $1 trillion industry today, $1 trillion industry. Okay. And last point, again, I couldn't reiterate more. Tightening global regulations will come home, and it's not too far in the future. So these are just some opening remarks I thought I'll just make, setting the stage for more detailed discussions that other people will make over the next for all of today and some tomorrow as well. So thank you very much for your attention.
This is Nawaz Khan from Cosmos VU Limited. I am from Hong Kong actually. I heard some of the chemicals imports that BIS happening. BIS standards. Yeah. May I know about more? Actually, it is common to that all importing chemicals, or particularly that because recently imported the STPP, they are putting that BIS. Some of that basic chemicals also they are putting BIS. So I just want to know about that.
BIS standards are being set, and it will require that the exporting company to India will need to comply with the standards, obtain certification before they are able to sell into the Indian market. It's happening. The list of chemicals is grown, and more are being added to it. This is one way that the government and the industry, I mean, this has happened largely because the industry has lobbied. And the government also feels that this is one way of protecting the industry without raising any tariff barriers, just make the process difficult. So I'm not a great fan of that, but it's happening. It's happening. More and more chemicals are added. There has been some pushback from customers that don't do this. And yeah,